Assalamu alaikum. In this lecture we are going to started in the previous lecture, which is translating idiomatic expressions. As usual, we will start our lecture by discussing or mentioning our goals of the lecture. We have two goals here. The first one is to know the difference between idioms and the proverbs, and also recognize some possibilities to translate idiomatic expressions. We mentioned before in the previous lecture that we have some possibilities to translate, some strategies to translate idiomatic expressions, but now we have some possibilities, namely we have four. First of all, we are going to discuss the difference between idioms and the proverbs. An idiom is an expression unique to a language, especially one whose sense is not predictable from the meanings and arrangements of its elements. As I mentioned before in the previous lecture, the meaning of the idiom cannot be concluded from its elements, from its parts. لا يمكن الوصول لمعنى التعبير الاصطلاحي من أجزائه. While a proverb is a short traditional saying of a didactic or advice-free nature in which a generalization is given, a specific, often metaphorical expression. بينما المثل هو مقولة قصيرة تقليدية قصيرة يتداولها الناس ذات مغزى ذو نصيحة أو تعليمي أو ذات مغزى تعليمي، تكون في الغالب عامة، ولكن يحدث أن تذكر في مجال معين أو حادثة معينة as we know، وبالتالي تأخذ نطاق خاص. In the first case, which means referring to the idioms, in the first case we are talking about a group of words which people familiar with the language, that's to say, people who study linguistics, people who study translation, that's to say, who are familiar with the language are likely to recognize, resulting in them grasping the underlying meaning, but which people unfamiliar with the language won't be able to comprehend. That is, الناس البسطاء الذين أو الناس الذين ليس لهم معرفة بالحقول اللغوية لربما لا يدركون معاني التعبيرات الاصطلاحية، the meanings of idioms. While, as I said, now people who study linguistics, people who study translation, for example, can and should know the meaning of idioms. In the second case, this refers to proverbs. It is a group of words which the hearer or reader can grasp, can get, can comprehend, provided they can see the point of the metaphor. Having seen the general truth expressed in this way, they can perhaps see the way in which it applies to current circumstances. وبالتالي بعد معرفتهم للمجاز أو للتعبير الاصطلاحي أو معنى المثل، بالتالي يمكنهم تطبيقها أو فهمها بالنسبة للوضع الحالي. However, this division is usually neglected. عادة ما يهمل أو غالبا ما يهمل هذا التقسيم بالنسبة ل idioms and the proverbs, and the two types seen above fall under the name of idioms in general in the most cases. So we are going, from now on, we are going to deal with the proverbs and idioms or any other fixed expressions as idioms. Of course, there are some exceptions like collocations we, we will see in the future. Now, translating idioms. Now we are going to discuss the possibilities. Well, we are going to tackle the main issue uh, when translating idiomatic expressions. And to begin with, we point out that once we have identified the idiom, we think that if possible it should always be translated into another idiomatic expression in the target language. عندما نتعامل مع التعبير الاصطلاحي، عندما نتعامل مع الidioms in general, as I said, this refers to idioms, proverbs, or any other fixed expressions. لا بد من أن نبحث على fixed expression آخر في اللغة الهدف, like another equivalent idiom in the target language, if possible of course, إذا كان ذلك ممكنا. So according to Peter Newmark, we can find 4 different possibilities, as I mentioned in the beginning of this lecture. When translating idiomatic expressions to another language, these are: the first possibility is expression and function coincide in target language and source language. That is, we can find a target language idiom which have the same function and meaning. 2. Same function but different expression. 3. Same function but slightly different expression. This means we can find an idiom in the TL which have the same function, the same role that the SL idiom can play. However, there is a slight difference in the form, in the expression. اختلاف بسيط بالمبنى ولكن نفس الوظيفة التي يمكن أن يؤديها التعبير الاصطلاحي في اللغة الأصلية. And finally, different function and expression in each language. اختلاف تام يشمل الوظيفة وكذلك المبنى من ناحية المبنى والمعنى. That is, it is a language specific idiom. وبالتالي هو تعبير اصطلاحي مختص أو مسكوكة مختصة باللغة. So we are going to consider examples of each one of these expressions. The first one, expression and function coincide in both languages. يعطي الضوء الأخضر sorry, to give a green light. يتصيد أو يصطاد أو اصطاد في الماء العكر, to fish in troubled waters. من زاوية مختلفة, from a different angle. الهدوء قبل العاصفة, calm before the storm. In this case, or in this possibility, we could say that the accomplishment of naturalness is one of the most important aims for the translator, till the point that naturalness is in the core of the transfer of meaning we are to achieve. توطين أو تقريب النص هو الهدف الأسمى بالنسبة للمترجم في هذه المرحلة، إذا ما كان يعني هو قلب المعنى المراد إيصاله. So the translator should always search for the best possibility, of course. يجب أن يبحث المترجم على الاحتمال أو الاحتمالية الأفضل that the target languages is offering. الاحتمالية الأفضل التي تمنحها أو تعطيها أو تعرضها اللغة الهدف in order to reflect the most faithful way the ideas of the source language. Those expressions which in TL and in SL are the same, that is, have the same components and bear the same meaning as the whole, are the clearest situation for the translator, and so the option to be made seems to be the easiest. These four examples show an equivalence in function and form, and therefore when translating the possibilities are very clear. However, still we have to consider factors. يجب علينا أن نأخذ بعين الاعتبار بعض العوامل. These are the frequency in use, the style of the text, of course, is important. The frequency of use, استخدامها، كمية استخدامها، تكرارها في الاستخدام، أيضا the register also, and so on and so forth. The register. Maybe form and meaning coincide in both languages, but it is still possible that while in one language the idiom is still in current use, in the other language it is hardly used or it sounds old or archaic. هذا يعني أن بعض التعبيرات الاصطلاحية ربما تبدو مستخدمة أو هي تستخدم بالفعل، ولكن في اللغة الثانية ربما تبدو قديمة جدا أو حتى يعني مهملة بالكامل. Move to the second possibility. Idioms with same function but different expression. This kind of units is quite often, and among them we find idioms that show a common interest about the truths, advices, conventional and folk wisdom. Most of our examples are sayings that show popular knowledge expressed in different ways in both languages, but in such a way that both languages show an identical experience and the conclusion or teaching from such experience. And let us see the examples below. إنك لا تجني من الشوك العنب. One can't get blood from the stone. علي بخفي حنين، أو رجع علي بخفي حنين، أو عاد بخفي حنين. empty-handed. أنت تريد وأنا أريد والله يفعل ما يريد. Man proposes and God disposes. إن هذا الشبل من ذاك الأسد، أو هذا الشبل من ذاك الأسد. like father like son. ودارهم ما دمت في دارهم، وأرضهم ما دمت في أرضهم. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. As I said, this kind of idioms continue conventional and folk wisdom, also truths, advices. So it differs completely from one language into another. We can see idioms equivalent in meaning but not in expression or use, and therefore in their pragmatic values. بالتالي البراغماتية تلك المصطلحات تختلف تماما قيمتها. We could also say that their degree of idiomaticity اصطلاحيتها درجة اصطلاحية هذه التعبيرات is different in some cases, and certainly their frequency and context are entirely diverse. For example, علي بخفي حنين is entirely different from empty-handed. Of course, many of you know the story of this idiom بخفي حنين عاد بخفي حنين, which talks about someone who met a Bedouin guy or man, and the story is very long, we don't have time, which is very different from empty-handed. So this completes or changes completely اصطلاحية and the pragmatic values of the idiom. 3. Idioms with same function but slightly different expression. Now we can observe in this possibility some examples of those units that bear the same meaning in nearly the same expression. يمكننا ملاحظة أن بعض الأمثلة أو بعض التعبيرات تحمل نفس المعنى، وأيضا تقريبا بعض المبنى، بعض التعبير وبعض المصطلحات الموجودة أيضا باللغة الهدف. Like for example المال يجر المال, money begets money. As in many other occasions, the metaphor they are presented with is clear enough in both languages to let us understand the meaning. وأيضا المجاز الموجود في اللغتين يساعدنا على فهمها أو فهم المعنى المقصود. And we have other examples like للضرورة أحكام, necessity knows no law, الحاجة تفتق الحيلة, necessity is the mother of invention, من كان بيته من زجاج لا يرشق الناس بالحجارة, people who live in glass houses should not throw stones. And we have the last possibility, which is different in both languages, different function and expression in both languages. In the cases where we have to translate an idiom which does not have an equivalent at all in another language, we often have to express the same meaning by the direct words that bear that value without any fixed idiom. علينا أن ننقل أو نعبر عن نفس المعنى بكلمات مباشرة. قد نضطر لاستخدام كلمات مباشرة لنقل المعنى ذاته. It should be noticed that there are nevertheless a possibility we should not disregard. هنالك احتمالية يجب أن نأخذها بعين الاعتبار ويجب أن لا نهملها. هي the translator may does not know there is such an idiom also in the target language. لربما يكون المترجم غير مطلع بأن هنالك تعبير اصطلاحي أو مسكوكة أخرى في اللغة الهدف وهو لا يعرفها تعادل التعبير الاصطلاحي أو المسكوكة اللغوية التي يريد ترجمتها, which should be the chosen option because the fixed expression convey a special sense also affected by the fact that they are repeated and so fixed units. This one القرد في عين أمه غزال. It can be figured out actually from the metaphor it carries. I'll send you the file and also this video as well, and of course I'll send you a homework to translate some idiomatic expressions as well. Thank you very much.